Hi, everyone. My name is Stan. Welcome to A Russian Opinion. Today we have Casimir, the only person, really, in the course of 3 years that I've had both channels, the only person who's actually accepted to have a conversation online. Most people usually leave a comment and then scurry away whenever I ask them to actually come and have a normal conversation, because only in a conversation can we find out we can find any kinds of points of contact, perhaps somewhere in the middle. We can find out what the other side is thinking. With written comments, it's mainly somebody writing something, then you're spending a lot of time trying to bring up sources and everything like that. And these conversations go on forever instead of having a nice sit down and normal conversation for 45 minutes like we're going to be doing here with Casimir. So if you want to introduce yourself, where you're from, where you live, it's completely entirely up to you.
Okay, hello, my name is Casimir. I'm from, I currently live in England. Lately I got interested a lot into politics. I'm interested in the situation about Ukraine, Russia, England. I watch everything closely. That's all I could say. And if people want to know what my goal is basically bring people from the Eastern Europe and Western Europe more together and being able to more cooperate, learn about each other, you know, to get rid of any stigmas, for example.
Okay. So you're from originally from which country?
Czech Republic.
You're from the Czech Republic. Okay. And when did you start following this conflict? Because you said you recently got into politics.
It's 2020.
2020. Okay. And what made you want to start following this particular conflict in 2020? What was the event that made you say, this is interesting. Let me take a look.
I think like a penchant for Eastern European culture. I started learning about history, about people. I started learning Russian language, and I got very much interested into it. I love to spend time watching Google Maps, cities. Yeah, that's it. And also, it was when Joe Biden became a president. There was Capitol riot and things like this, Donald Trump, when it was a lot of mess and the instability in the United States. Lately, it's very, very alarming.
And this instability, I lived in the States, you can probably hear, and in Canada, this instability, and I'm going to be asking what may seem to be stupid questions, but it's good to get a base understanding. This particular instability, do you think it's caused by internal factors and problems, historical problems that have been in the US, or do you think that this instability is caused by Russia, for example?
I don't think this is caused by Russia at all. No, I think it's caused by historic problems, demographic problems. They have America has a very bad history. Before the Second World War, even after, it was a very racist country. The government, United States government, was sympathizing with, I think, Nazi Germany. They joined the war right when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. Yeah. So I'm under the impression that, for example, Black people were very segregated, and that the current government, that was the former government that was in that time in the charge, they didn't see Black people or anyone to be a part of American culture. They preferred, white people, Irish, German, people of European heritage.
That's interesting that I'm going to point something out. like Irish, for example, they went through a very racist period in the U.S. where Americans were extremely.
I've seen Gangs of New York. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's just, that's a movie, but there's, lots of historical things that you can take a look at. Then you had, of course, the Native Americans, the Chinese as well. Any wave of new immigrants did bring about racist attitudes, whether it was from the government itself or whether it was from local people. So, I mean, still, it's racism does exist. Unfortunately, it's a normal situation, but it does exist. It didn't really go anywhere. It didn't disappear. But okay, so at least we understand that, because I expected this conversation to go a little bit different than the way it's going, and I appreciate it going either way. But okay, so Joe Biden got elected. That got you interested. Regarding this particular conflict, when do you think it actually started?
Everything?
The conflict in Ukraine.
It started when there was, Ukraine. It started a long time ago. There was 2006, the Orange Revolution. That time was already in the country was certain instability, and Ukraine has always been more divided between West and East. We both know that some people wanted to join European Union. The older generation, for example, they were more satisfied with Yanukovych for pro-Russian. People even a year ago, before the invasion, older people were very disappointed in the current Ukrainian government, that they're being they don't get things done, simply not enough as expected.
Well, this war does have very, very deep roots. This conflict, this war, this military operation, whatever you want to call it, it has very, very deep roots. In fact, we can even go way back in history, all the way to Otto von Bismarck and his thoughts on Russia and Ukraine, and how one way to defeat Russia as an empire back then was actually through Ukraine. Well, because Ukraine was a breadbasket. There was lots of manufacturing, especially in the Donbass area. But if we go briefly through history, I mean, the reason why Russia views Ukraine as key to not only European stability and security, but to Russian stability and security, is that in 2008, for example, officially NATO, okay, which the Czech Republic is part of, NATO welcomed Georgia and Ukraine into the alliance. We know that the U.S., and now the U.S. admits themselves, they do admit it. You can look through their documents, you can do your own research. It's not the Kremlin government. It's not propaganda coming out of the Kremlin. They did fund the revolution in 2006. Yeah, I think it was 2006 or 2004, the Orange Revolution. They did fund the Maidan Revolution in 2013 and 2014. Obama did admit it. They spent, I think it was, what, $5 billion that was spent or something like that? Correct me if I'm wrong. McCain, Newland were there. Newland was famously giving out cookies to the protesters as a symbolic gesture. McCain was speaking to Ukrainians from a stage. Newland and another American were discussing who they should put in power after the coup happened, or after the coup were to happen. I'm not too sure exactly on the details. But we know there's heavy involvement, and people bring up the Budapest Memorandum. They're saying that Russia violated it. Okay. In your opinion, okay, I mean, one, have you read the points in the Budapest Memorandum, and are you familiar with who potentially violated it first? Like, what's your opinion on it?
I haven't read the Budapest Memorandum. I've read that Ukraine basically gave up their nuclear arsenal in exchange for Russia to guarantee their independence and sovereignty.
Well, it's actually, there are 6 points in it, and in all those 6 points, well, it's actually in 5 points, U.S., Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and Russia and Ukraine are all part of those agreements. And the 6th point is actually, if there are any disagreements, then the parties should get together and talk about it. Not in those words. But if you read through the points, one of those points actually states that there shall be no interference. So all sides guarantee security of Ukraine and independence. And also all sides, including the US and Great Britain, Northern Ireland, is actually stated this way in there. And Russia as well. They have to make sure that there are no economical or political, there is no economical or political or economic or political interference in Ukraine from those parties. That's one of the points. Now, if you Wikipedia Budapest Memorandum, that doesn't give you any of the points. You have to actually look through the article. There's an official name for this document, and then you actually get the document in English. One of those points, no political, no economic interference. Now, we can debate about who violated that first, but with funding of the Orange Revolution, okay, with accepting by NATO, and the US is the head of NATO, we know that, by accepting Ukraine, that is direct political and economic interference into Ukraine before Russia even had the referendum in Crimea. You can look that up.
Yeah, but I honestly I haven't heard from anybody that Ukraine entering NATO would be violation of the Budapest Memorandum. I haven't heard it from anyone, to be honest.
That's
not
because
not even from Russian government.
Yeah.
Not anyone. That is the first time I'm hearing from you, honestly.
Yeah, read it. There's the Russian government's horrible at marketing and in the information war. They're really quite bad at it. In fact, they still think that constantly speaking in Russian is going to get something done. We Russians, we know history. We know what has happened. We potentially can predict what can happen or what may happen, but they're not really good at marketing it to people and showing exactly what. Now, if you look through the points, read them yourself. I mean, this is something that's available. The official document is there on the web, not just a Wikipedia article. The Wikipedia article leads to the official document. Now, we both, in the beginning of this conversation, we agreed that the U.S. was politically and economically interfering in Ukraine with the Orange Revolution. And this is counter to one of the points in the Budapest Memorandum.
So there is nothing wrong with interfering like economically, like I think it's okay if somebody makes if United States and Ukraine make business deals together. It's for the economy.
That's not economic interference, though.
What is it then?
Economic interference would be, or economic coercion would be, funding, for example, various NGOs to paint one side of the political spectrum as bad, as corrupt. I mean, they both
seem to be like political interference more than economical.
Well, economic interference would actually be, as well as making deals, specific deals, if a particular political party were to paint another one in a bad manner, in a bad light. I mean, you have a point. Politics and economics are quite ingrained. They're tied together. That is true. You're correct. But in either way, I mean, if they did, which they did, and they admit that they did, interfere in Ukrainian politics and Ukrainian economics, I mean, then it's a clear violation of one of the points of the Budapest Memorandum. Not to mention, I mean, for Russia, it's a big problem because Ukraine vowed to be neutral as part of their constitution. A constitution that they accepted in 1996, I believe, they created. So they've had numerous ones as well, but they were supposed to remain neutral. Mm-hmm. How is joining NATO, an alliance that was created in 1949, 6 years before the Warsaw Pact was created in 1955, how is that remaining neutral, though? I mean, to Russians, to us, it's a direct military threat.
It might be military threat, yeah, but NATO is usually it's a defensive alliance. They're not. I know they've done some things, but they try to. It's mostly to defend themselves, like smaller countries, bigger countries. But Russia, is the biggest country, and many neighbors. You make your neighbors very nervous. To be told.
Well, if you don't poke the bear, you have nothing to be nervous about. as it's a good saying. But okay, so NATO is a defensive alliance. Do you know what a Jupiter missile is? I think it's SM-79, or I can't remember the code, but a Jupiter missile.
No.
Okay. By any chance, do you know where they were placed in 1959, 1960, something like that?
You mean like that Cuban Missile Crisis?
That's the thing. It was something that happened before the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we have the atomic bomb. The creation of it was started in Nazi Germany, and then the I think it was Operation Paperclip, when the American government basically airlifted scientists from Nazi Germany into the U.S., and they started working on the Manhattan Project, which led to the atomic bomb. And U.S. is the only country to use a weapon like this against the civilian population mostly. Then that atomic bomb was somehow, the secrets thankfully were leaked to the Soviet Union to create parity. That way, no country will destroy another, basically. That's the whole theory of mutually assured destruction. Now, I say thankfully because Churchill actually, right up till the end of the World War II, the Patriotic War, he actually came out saying that we should attack the Soviet Union. So that was his crazy plan. But either way, then NATO's created, then the Warsaw Pact is created. Then Turkey, okay, accepts Jupiter missiles on its territory. This is the first time that nuclear missiles that can deliver nuclear warheads, to be exact, are placed within reach of Moscow at the time when intercontinental ballistic missiles were highly inaccurate. And this is a NATO country giving to another NATO country nuclear warheads after another NATO country, merely like, what is it, weeks, I believe, or months after the end of World War II, stated that we should actually invade the Soviet Union. And there were plans drawn up to deliver nuclear weapons to it. So the whole idea that NATO from the get-go, or even now, is a purely defensive alliance is, in my point, is not valid. Because right prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis was a response to Jupiter missiles being placed in Turkey. Now, this is all available information. It's not like secret CIA, FSB type information. It's all there. It's all available, even the dates. And then we had the Cuban Missile Crisis because we said, oh, hey, if you want to put missiles close to us, we're going to put missiles close to you. The U.S. didn't like that. So why should we?
You don't have to like it, but there is a problem.
I mean, I can give you another more recent example. You're saying that we don't have to like it. Sure, no problem. But why should we accept it? For example, America was building.
There is a question. Have you basically received any kind of physical threat? Did the United States directly threaten you to nuke you? Did Europe threaten you as well to attack, to directly attack Russia, to invade your country? Have they done it?
Americans have a first strike policy. Russians do not have a first strike nuclear policy. As a not as people, but as the government. Like that's a threat. That's a threat on its own.
It's still just policy, though. You see what is happening right now.
I know it's policy. It is policy, but it would be criminal for our government and any government. It would be criminal for any government whose one of the purposes of a government is to protect its citizens from military invasions. It would be criminal for a government to dismiss that as just policy. It would be.
Of course.
So the threats come, and I told you again, the threats come historically from Churchill, historically from missiles, Jupiter missiles in Turkey. They were nuclear capable. I mean, there were many situations where this was a threat. The threat was when the American government named us one of their enemies, and they have the first strike policy in place. So at any time, if they have the capability to strike us without us being able to answer back, they have that policy that they can do so if they wish.
Yeah, they have the that's the way of the world. They have the chance to basically put the rockets in there, so they do it. It would be stupid for them not to do it. basically, they see you as a threat. They see you as a threat to Europe, and they try to defend themselves. Do you know when Zelensky was imposing on West to enact no-fly zone, and whole world basically got scared, like, what is he doing? What the hell? We're not going to. Nobody wants a nuclear war. We're doing everything we can to avoid any kind of conflict.
So then why are you at our borders? That's the key question. When, in fact, over the course of 30 years, who have we attacked? Ourselves, saying that here, that's it. We're going to attack because we're going to take over your regions. Up until this conflict.
You just attacked Ukraine.
Up until this conflict. This conflict was the first time Russia said, you know what? We're going to go and do it first based on a number of prerequisites that we can talk about.
You invaded Georgia in 2008.
Okay, we invaded Georgia in 2008. Did you read that the one of the EU commissions actually stated that it was Saakashvili and it was Georgia that instigated the conflict?
No, they're saying basically that they were the Georgian territory was bombarded by these minorities. I don't know, the Ossetian Republic or somebody like that.
Yes, but the European, again, this is not Kremlin.
I cannot imagine exactly like how Georgia could ignite the conflict. It's a really small country. They have like 3 million people. You can't like militarily, you cannot compare it to Russia at all. They're just
you can't. It's true. But when you constantly tell people, when you give them weapons, when you give them arms, and you constantly tell people that you can do this, you can beat them. You constantly say that the Russian economy and the Russian army are completely incapable of doing anything. I mean, if you've been following American news and American policy for the past 20 years, you can kind of pick up on that.
Logically, they're saying you don't have to stand the Russian aggression. That's what they're saying.
No, but again, Russian aggression, it's actually like arguing about this is pointless because you're living in Europe, and it was a European Commission that placed responsibility on this conflict on Saakashvili and Georgia. I can send you the link to it. It's not some kind of weird website from Alex Jones.
Okay,
it is the European
Commission. You still invaded the country. You still invaded the country.
And again, it was ignited by Georgia. The conflict was ignited by Georgia, and the bombardment actually killed, I think it was 147 Russian peacekeepers that were stationed there since, I can't remember what year, to be quite honest with you. That conflict, and you know what? If Russia wanted to take over Georgia, okay, we wouldn't have turned around when we were like 8 kilometers or 60 kilometers away from Tbilisi, and then we went back. Georgia is an independent country. It's there. Russia didn't take over. Again, Georgia as a conflict, proven already, was instigated by Saakashvili. In fact, Saakashvili now is a criminal in his own country. I believe he's in jail right now. Actually, people sort of forgot about him.
Still, there is a bad blood between Georgia and Russia right now, and Georgian people know that with this military conflict, you have pushed your influence heavily in their land, on the politicians, everything you do. Basically, you have exercised your power over them.
Well, Europe does this. America does this all the time. So what's the problem where I don't really understand? How can someone give us lessons in morality when they do this? I mean, I could understand if a country was the holy grail of everything neutral and benevolent, and then they say, listen, you can't do this, and they place sanctions on any country that does anything militarily. Okay, I understand that. I would agree with that. But how can one have a moral high ground when they've been killing millions of people, destroying tens of countries, arming rebels, arming various terrorist groups, all proven by the own U.S. government? They have a very interesting way of, telling what they did, revealing their own secrets. And again, Georgia, if they didn't instigate that conflict wouldn't have happened. It's proven that they instigated it. So now we have the situation where during the Bucharest summit in 2008, it was Bucharest, it was in Romania, NATO welcomed Ukraine and Georgia. And then 4 months later, the war with Georgia happened. instigated by Georgia, according to Europe themselves.
Okay, what was the
how's that? Huh?
What so what was if United States or any foreign power was started this? What was what they wanted to do? What they wanted to achieve?
Well, now this is probably something that you'd have to ask the Americans, but in my opinion, this was a test. This was a test to see how Russia would respond. That's it.
You know, in my opinion, I wouldn't poke the bear, honestly. That's my opinion on this. I wouldn't. If you know, I live in United Kingdom. I stand for United Kingdom, and to see your reaction like this, I know United States. Yeah, if it might be this case. At the end of the day, it's just a game of power. Like
it is a game of power, but to us, it's actually a game of survival, because one, we have we have events in history that Europeans collectively have come to our country and have killed millions of people or tried to take over. It's happened several times, so it's not like, you know, we as people didn't really change. We're still, you know, somewhere along the way, we're still just a little bit smarter than animals. And when push comes to shove, when diplomacy, when it goes out the window, then we start fighting each other. Now, regarding Ukraine, now that we get to it, why do you think that Ukraine in NATO poses a threat to Russia, or why doesn't it pose a threat to Russia? I mean, this is I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Oh yeah, first of all, it is a game for survival for every one of us at this point, especially with both parties being armed with nuclear arsenal. That's the thing. I believe that Ukraine has a right to choose if they want to enter the NATO or not. There is a good possibility the Ukraine could remain neutral, but I don't see that being an option. You know what United States is doing with other. It's a well-known fact that CIA is trying to throw over weak, unstable governments, especially when it's Ukraine, countries with weak identity. I don't think there is any option for them being neutral. For example, Finland could be neutral. Finland is, for me, is a very solid country. They wouldn't play any political game with anybody. They stand for freedom, for neutrality, and they wouldn't attack you. They wouldn't try to be United States pets. They wouldn't be your pet. But Ukraine needs to be on either one of side or needs to be separated. The conflict was inevitable in Ukraine. The conflict was inevitable. It's between two sides, between European Union. It's placed, Ukraine's placed between two powers. There something had to be done, and unfortunately, we have a military conflict right now.
Well, actually, Europe. The first. I'm not trying to name call anyone. I'm not trying to insult anyone, but the first, if you want to rank losers from this conflict, loser, in first place is Ukraine, because there's military action on their land. Okay, they're losing civilians, they're losing military, they're losing money. There's capital flight. There's people are leaving, etc. Territories are being lost. Loser number two in this situation is debatable whether it's the European Union or Russia. It could be both. We could be on together. But European Union gains absolutely nothing from this particular conflict. In Russia itself, we're also as well, we're losing military personnel. We're losing equipment. We're also funding this as well. So it's not like we're coming out ahead, depending on the situation goes. But the European Union is losing an actual trade partner who was fulfilling trade obligations up until this point. I mean, just today, I believe Gazprom stopped shipping gas to Poland and Bulgaria. I think it was today, I believe, because we said, you know what, if you're going to freeze our assets, sure, we'll just take payment in rubles, just bring the euros in. The bank will do the exchange right then and there, and then you'll pay us, and nobody is Nobody violated any sanctions and everything goes as is. But Europeans will be at a major disadvantage when you'll have to buy American liquefied natural gas, which is a lot more expensive. So your prices will actually significantly increase. Not to mention that you'll have, because of the increase in prices and loss of job opportunities, because of refugees not only coming from or through Turkey, but through Ukraine, from Ukraine, will cause an exodus of Europeans who want to live better. And they don't really have any other place to go. They're not going to go to China because the U.S. is starting a war. They're trying to start a war with China. Okay, they're not going to go there. They're going to go most likely to the U.S. because capital goes where it's safe. So Europe doesn't win from this. Russia doesn't win from this.
Obviously, yeah, economically nobody wins. Nobody wanted this war. That's why, not even China, nobody. If you look at the numbers, everything went down after the war. Like nobody is profiting. Only the prices sold up. That's the truth. That's nobody they can dispute it. There is no winner. There is also but ideologically, Ukraine is winning. Ukraine, when they're fighting against Russia, they're seeing it as a fight for their freedom. With this fight, they're molding their identity. Basically, they are distincting themselves from Russian culture. People are starting to recognize Ukrainians are different. Before the war, they thought Ukrainians, they're basically like Russians. Right now, they see Ukrainians separated from Russians. That's a ideological win for Ukraine.
Well, it's a marketing win. We can call it that. But as far as Ukrainians and Russians, I mean, I have a question for you. How come none of this support happened? How come London, for example, Stansted, didn't welcome Ukrainian refugees when Ukraine was murdering Ukrainians in the East? Because they did the exact same thing as Ukrainians in the West did, was to overthrow the government. Why wasn't Europe taking in those people? It was only Russia that was doing so. We've taken in, now there's about 2.5 million refugees from Ukraine living in Russia, and most of them were from before the 24th of February 2022. Why do you think they turned a blind eye? Why do you think they don't really care about the lives of those living in East Ukraine? Because obviously they don't.
There was a great tension there. Later there was Brexit, but I know Poland did care. There was still, even before the war, 1 million residents, Ukrainian citizens, were living in Poland. We, Czech Republic, we were always taking Ukrainians. Even since early 2000, they've been a cheap labor, but we've been very friendly towards them, very open. We've been giving them visas. I think 120,000 Ukrainians were living in the area around Prague, or a big number. Yeah, we never had a problem with them. When it comes to Germany, I've heard many German people were taking refugees, but the problem is, for example, Western Ukraine was relatively safe. So there was a war in Donbass, but in West, maybe they have tried to calculate that there is no imminent danger, that is not necessarily to provide visas, provide refugee status for Ukrainian people.
Okay, so then the follow-up question is, why wasn't it stopped? Why was this particular, and it's a civil war. Why was it not stopped? Why was it that Russia had to draw up the Minsk agreements? Why was it that Russia was constantly, new sanctions were created when Russia wasn't part of the Minsk agreements? It created them, but it would be like if, the conflict wasn't dying down, then the other parties who signed the Minsk agreements, which was Germany and I believe, was it France or
Germany
Poland?
and France, there was like in Normandy that, I don't know.
Exactly. So my question is, how come Russia was getting the sanctions for the Minsk agreements when violations of the ceasefire were happening on either sides of the civil war in Donbass, but Germany and France, if it was France, didn't get any sanctions on them? Why was it that Russia was getting punished for something that Ukraine had to do?
Russia was sanctioned for illegal annexation of Crimea in the first place. I know that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about sanctions in relations to the unfulfilling of the Minsk agreements.
The Minsk agreement were unfulfilled from both sides, from both.
Yeah, but only Russia was sanctioned.
Well, because they cannot sanction themselves. You could have sanctioned, Russia could have sanctioned them because you are a different party. You know, we are in union, European, we are part of the NATO. Why would we sanction ourselves?
Well, exactly. So there's a vested interest. That's what I mean. That's why I asked why this conflict wasn't resolved. There's a vested interest for this conflict, for some reason, not to be resolved, because 7 years of Minsk agreements and only Russia was trying to get Ukraine to stop killing its own civilians.
Now, there is a need for a conflict to be resolved, but none of the parties, especially Russia doesn't want to make any compromises. That's the problem. Not in Ukraine, nobody wants to make.
Well, have you read the Minsk agreements?
Yes, I've read the Minsk agreements.
Okay, so then you know that the republics who were the Donetsk and Lugansk republics who were supposed to be part of Ukraine if all the Minsk agreement. Yeah. So I don't really understand what the problem is in this case.
That the Minsk agreements would never been it was never been fulfilled from both parties. That's a fact.
But what? How can Russia fulfill the Minsk agreements if they're a guarantee, but the guarantor, but they're not part of it. They can't fulfill them if Ukraine, the government in Ukraine, has to negotiate with Lugansk and Donetsk and has to go there. Now Zelensky and Poroshenko, they never went to Lugansk and Donetsk. They never spoke to the leadership there. So how can Russia fulfill those agreements if they're not part of them?
In 2019, there was in a Ukrainian parliament, they have agreed to give this opportunity to Luhansk and Donetsk. They already done it. They fulfilled this commitment. They wanted to, and they have been arguing about it. They've been arguing, but one of the politicians says we have to show to the United States, we have to show to the West, we want to resolve this conflict. The problem was that in eastern Ukraine, that there was a problem with Minsk agreement that when Luhansk and Donetsk wanted to do the elections, that the Ukrainians were watching over it, or there was some kind of misconception that Sergei Lavrov didn't like it. He didn't like that basically that they have so much influence, and they refused to make any compromise, or they refused to give in.
The reason why Ukraine didn't like the Minsk agreements was that there was federalization in the Minsk agreements. And what federalization, Russia is a federation. Canada is a confederation of provinces or federation of provinces, basically where there's a certain amount of freedom that each province does have in regarding to having their own policies. For example, Quebec, they're French speaking. Was it Nova Scotia, I believe, or New Brunswick is both French and English. So these provinces do have some control over their own. And that was a problem for Ukraine. They didn't want to be federalized because they have, as you mentioned before, Ukraine was split. It was split culturally, even with the types of heroes that they have. In the West, their heroes are Bandera and Shushkevich. I mean, the Ukrainian president Yushchenko, he tried to make them official heroes of Ukraine. That pissed off a lot of people, not only in Ukraine, but in Israel and Poland as well, because they're like, how can you do this to people who murdered so many people? You're making them heroes. In East Ukraine, there's a population that is Russophile, while in the West of Ukraine, they're Russophobe. And that's a big split. Now, regarding Crimea, first of all, one Crimea was like a kind of an independent republic. They even had their own constitution way before Russian troops were present in Crimea. Two, this is not their first referendum. This is their third referendum. They tried to leave or tried to be at least independent from Ukraine since the 1990s. I'm sure, I don't know if people in Europe know that or not, but this is their third. Second, the people who were in government under Ukraine were still in government under Crimea when it became independent, and then under Russia when it joined Russia. Mm-hmm. So it's not like Russia came in and put in their own people. It's the same people who were there. And not to mention, why is it okay for Kosovo to be recognized as independent when Serbians really disagree with that? Why is it okay for that? But then again, it's not okay for Crimea to be gain complete independence when the constitution of Ukraine was completely trashed during the illegal coup d'etat in 2014. Okay, why is it okay for Crimea, not okay for Crimea to make their own choices?
First of all, about Kosovo, it is not okay for Kosovo to be. In my opinion, I think Kosovo is Serbian. First of all, the conflict was like, this Kosovo government. People are saying, hey, it's known that the country is run by gun smugglers, war criminals, people with connection to Albanian mafia, Kosovo Liberation Army. They've been doing horrible things on both parties. They basically, Americans, yeah, in that case, that is just politics, and it's disgusting because Serbia is close with Russia. And I think West has just sided with Kosovo because they don't like Serbia being close to Russia, in my
Well,
opinion. I don't agree with I think Serbia was done wrongly with shelling of the of Serbia by NATO. It was very wrong from NATO.
well,
And wrong.
but in this case, see, I mean, previously earlier you said that NATO was a defensive alliance, and here they go.
I know, yeah. There are things they've done. They are not right. They have justified it that Serbia was committing war crimes, but Croatians are Serbians. Croatians might have done something to Serbians. Serbians have done something to Croatians. It's not clear. The bombing. It wasn't supposed to be bombed. They had no right to do it at all. It was a horrible act. And you're saying about Ukraine that. Yeah, Ukraine is culturally still very divided country. It's the second biggest country in Europe, and it's a big problem that it is not a federation. It should be federation. Look at Germany. Germany was it's basically artificial state, and it works. It's basically they live in unity. Ukraine is trying to impose the policy of one country on them. You know that, for example, in Carpathia, you have Ruthenian people, they are minorities, and they don't let the Ukrainian government doesn't let elect them their own people. They have in the town hall they're putting Ukrainian people who are pro-Ukrainian. Same with Crimea. Crimea has a declared referendum, and Ukraine wouldn't allow it to become independent. They're still trying to push on them the policy of one Ukraine, which I think is completely wrong.
And in this case, I mean, if there is here's the reality of any revolution. With any revolution, there are people who disagree. And when there is a revolution that, well, mostly all of them actually completely trashes a country's constitution or the legal way of power transfer, which is usually through voting, when that happens, territories do leave. Because people in other territories, they don't agree with what happened as a revolution, and they end up leaving. So in this case, Crimea, which is I mean, their population is not just ethnically Russian, they're pro-Russian. And one interesting aspect, I mean, Ukraine, I don't know if you know this is a fact. They did shut off water and electricity to Crimea. Now, if you have a government that says, hey, our people are living in Crimea and they're taken over by Russian forces and they're forcefully kept there, why were they water was shut off, electricity was shut off?
It's a revenge. They didn't want to take it. Like, this is a humiliation for a sovereign country to part of the of Crimea being annexed by a different one. It was a retaliation strike, basically.
Yeah, but it wasn't a retaliation strike against Russia. It was a retaliation strike against the people living in Crimea, because they're the ones that were suffering the most under that.
It was the only thing they could do that time.
Yeah, but still, that doesn't give them any kind of moral points. In fact, it doesn't get the population to say, oh, yeah, you know what? We don't like these Russians that came in, even though we welcomed them. Let's go rejoin Ukraine, the one that has cut off our water and electricity.
Yeah, but that's true. But they haven't been, technically, they haven't had the control of that region, so they don't have any obligation to take care of that part of the province. That's the obligation of
that's true.
The duty of Russia.
That's true, but that is a violation of human rights. If you look at, I believe the UN has a set of, I think it's the UN, I have to double check on that, but preventing people from getting access to water is a literal violation of human rights. And nobody said a thing. Nobody cared. Nobody in the West said, hey, listen, they may have voted in a way that doesn't go in your favor, but you can't shut off people from water.
Yeah, but UN has also seen this as an act of aggression from Russia that they have annexed.
That's understandable. Listen, I get that. But again, It's not like it's not like 2 million people on that island are Russian troops, okay? That's not possible. The Russian army itself is about 2 million with the secondary personnel, army, navy, everything, air force. With the secondary personnel, it's about 2 million. That island, that peninsula, is about 2 million. The majority of people who were punished were regular civilians who actually, after joining Russia, rejoining Russia, you want to call it annexed, sure, you can do so. I don't really care. They got 3 official languages, Russian, Ukrainian, and Tatar, as being part of there. Whereas in Ukraine, from 2014 to 2019 to 2020, Russian speakers and ethnic Russians were losing their right to speak their own language with government institutions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why I understand this is more of a rhetorical question as to why are all of these crimes, literal crimes against humanity, as well as, not just genocide, but crimes against humanity being perpetrated by one nation, and that nation is getting a complete pass. Mm-hmm. They can do so freely with no problem, and whenever Russia says, listen, there are people suffering, and we're actually going to go and protect them, something that the United States would do at the drop of a hat, we get labeled as the bad guy. This is a rhetorical question. I already know the answer to it. The answer is in geopolitics, but I wanted to voice it. Do you see what I mean? I mean, this is the concern we have. If you take it all the way from the Jupiter missiles to the bombing of Yugoslavia to invasions of other countries, we see NATO not as a defensive alliance, especially when they dictate where we can and cannot have our troops within our own borders. Well, we view that as a threat.
Militarily, they are defensive alliance, but it doesn't mean they cannot. They don't have to. They are basic. This is defending themselves with these. They are defending themselves in a pacifistic way. They trying to avoid war.
In this case, I can use this exact same example. We're also defending ourselves by making sure that there are no military installations in Ukraine. That's the general goal.
And but you did it by using military force, which
just like NATO did. We did the exact same thing, except we actually, instead of going to bomb brown people in Iraq and Afghanistan, we said there are. Did you follow every single event that happened prior to the invasion?
No, but let's get back to the Crimea thing. When you said that you cannot say it was like a war crime of a breach of human rights. That I haven't heard any news about that people are dying of thirst or anything in Crimea. I've seen some kind of short documentary on YouTube that it's hurting business. That is like a water is causing land to be dry and everything, but people were not dying on the base.
So hold on a second. In your opinion, it's only a war crime when people actually start dying, but not when not preventing them from having fresh, clean sources of water?
No, I mean that when they didn't provide them water. I meant by that it didn't put their lives at stake.
It did. That's the thing. And the animals that were there, their lives were also put at stake, because Crimea naturally has a problem with fresh water. Even during the Soviet times, there were problems with getting water to Crimea. Now that was entirely shut off, I understand there's collection of rainwater.
If they didn't have a source of water and people would be trying, I'm pretty positive that other countries are altruistic enough to help Crimea or Russia. And Russia, even though Russia is obliged to help, and Russia would help in any way. This is not like if Ukraine cuts off the water, that people will imminently die.
No, we did imminently, but still preventing someone from having drinking water is actually a crime. And you know what? We did do something. You're right. Now Crimeans have water. We had to invade to get Crimeans water.
From your point of view, Crimea wasn't under control of Ukraine. So, for example, why Spain should provide clean water for our
No.
Why should they provide clean water?
No,
for
they don't have to.
A country that is not.
They don't have to. That's not the point.
That doesn't make any. That what you're saying doesn't make sense.
No, that's not the point. This is a naturally flowing. This is naturally flowing water. they're not giving it to them via pipe. They blocked a dam that water was flowing through it. That's the point. And nobody in Europe gave a shit about it.
Yeah.
Nobody.
People gave shit actually about annexation of Crimea because this is people don't give.
Do you know why? Do you know why though?
People don't give shit about that dam. People give shit about the annexation because this was a military intervention, and this is causing the world peace to be the world not to be stable. That's
so hold on a second. So did the annexation of Crimea happen before or after the revolution in on Maidan? After. So why is it that we're at fault when a country was put into turmoil by American money, American influence, and this is proven, they've admitted it, so it's not like it's Kremlin propaganda. They were put into turmoil. There was an illegal coup d'etat, and people in Crimea who saw this, regular people who saw this as a threat, because the people on the Maidan weren't exactly in favor of any kind of Russian, anything Russian at all, even if it's in Ukraine. I mean, they were jumping, students were jumping saying "Moskalyako na Gilyako." Do you know what that means? Basically,
I don't speak Russian very well.
It's not Russian. It's Ukrainian. It's Ukrainian. Moskalyako na Gilyako. You can look that up. They were saying what? Kill the Russian.
Moskalyako? He's Muscovites, isn't it? Muscovites.
Moskal is a Russian ethnic person living in Ukraine or in Russia. It's not death to the Russian in Moscow.
Okay.
Moskvich is someone from Moscow. Moskal is a derogatory term, okay, for Russians living in Ukraine. So when you have people jumping up and down Moskalyako na Gilyako, when you have people whose heroes are Stepan Bandera and Shushkevich, people in Crimea who are ethnically and in other ways tied to Russia, they saw this as a threat. So I understand that you see it as an annexation, fine. But do you really, do you honestly believe, do you think that 20,000 troops got 2 million people to vote one way or another?
No, in my opinion is if Crimea wants to be part of the Russia, they have a right to do so.
And they did.
Yeah, they are in the right. We know that Russia, it was the Russia who Crimea wasn't Ukrainian. They were living Pontic Greeks. Right after them, there have been Tatars, Italians, were there as well. Genoese merchants were in control of the territory. The Russian have then the Crimean Khanate became a march of Ottoman Empire, the vassal state, and the Russians they pushed Turks back from, and they have founded Sevastopol, for example. It's like Russian city. Most of the people I've seen, and many Crimeans, like they were happy they've been under the Russian government. I think that was great. I think I am for stability. I'm for this. Like I'm not for territorial games about that Ukraine being strong, and I want people to be happy. I want Russians to be happy. I want Ukrainians to be happy, and I think Crimean people, they deserve justice just like everybody else. There shouldn't be any politics in this. We are living in an age where we could work everything out, and there is a problem with the Crimean annexation that it wasn't internationally observed. That's why they have proclaimed it was illegal.
Well, the interesting part is during the vote there were international observers, and in fact after Crimea, you call it an annexation, we call it rejoined. The Crimeans say they rejoined back. There were people, delegations from France, I believe, maybe from Bavaria, I believe, who went to Crimea and saw it for their own eyes. Nobody was living under any kind of military occupation or threat or anything like that. I mean, that's how it was portrayed by Western countries, is that poor Ukrainians were under military dictatorship in Crimea. I mean, this is the problem. One of the problems that Russians have is the hypocrisy and the lies. And you know what? We don't even have to, technically speaking, the Russian government doesn't really have to create any kind of propaganda. They can just point out the actual lies that go on and say, look here, but that doesn't work. That doesn't work either way, because Do you by any chance know what's going on with China and the Solomon Islands at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My opinion is if Solomon Island want to have a Chinese military on their soil, that's completely fine.
Yeah, but that's your opinion. But governments have a different way of thinking, right? Australia said that this is a red line and they'll go to war with China, right? The US said kind of. They're not saying 100%, but they also said that they wouldn't like that and they could go to war with China over the Solomon Islands. Now, the Solomon Islands, they signed a security agreement that doesn't, I believe it doesn't, probably there might be a military base, maybe not, I don't know. But the point of the matter is that Americans are doing the exact same thing in Europe, okay? And they find that to be okay. And when China does it, for example, they see it as a red line. But yet, they don't see that as a red line for Russia, who's saying, listen, we know you wanted to build military bases in Crimea, in Sevastopol. You wanted to build various bases, and you had training centers in Ukraine. You wanted to put missiles there. Why don't you see this as a red line for Russia? But the Solomon Islands seems to be a red line for the US and a red line for Australia.
Well, everybody has a right to express their own opinions.
Yeah, I know, but people like you, see, the thing is, you have the right to express your own opinion. I have the right to express our own opinion. When governments are in play, serious stuff happens. So it's no longer an opinion when government institutions are saying, or people in the government saying, this is a red line, we'll go to war. See, the thing is, you're saying that Russia, for example, is causing problems with international stability. I'll give you something else. The fact that there is no actual set of rules that everyone can follow is causing instability, because you have one side saying, don't do as we do as we tell you to do. And everyone must follow that strategy.
Okay,
that's what's causing instability. We already talked about Kosovo. We talked about Yugoslavia. We talked about the Solomon Islands. We talked about all the, we didn't talk in full, but all the different interventions that the U.S. under false pretenses had in, for example, Iraq or in Libya, or when they illegally, and I believe they're still in Syria protecting oil bases, I believe. They basically stole Syrian oil, and that's completely fine. So that's entirely okay, right? And you might say, well, this is aboutism. No, it's not whataboutism, because they're following a set of standards, and they're saying, don't do what we do what we tell you to do. And what we tell you to do is be a good boy and sit, and we'll do everything for you. To Russians, this is how we feel about it.
What Americans are telling you to do?
Well, one, they were telling us for a while where we can and can't have our troops, for example, what we can and can't do in Ukraine, whether we can or can't protect people who actually ask for protection, whether we can or can't recognize the breakaway republics. There's a whole history of it. I mean, it's not a secret that the American consulate, basically, or the consul of the U.S. met with opposition parties, not even the real opposition parties, but the fringe opposition parties here. I mean, I'll give you another standard. For example, do you know Osman Kavala, or Kavala, I think his name is? He's a Turkish. Turkey said that he instigated protests in Turkey in 2013 or before. Do you know who I'm talking about? I think it's Osman Kavala.
What did he do again?
Turkey is saying that he instigated protests against the government. He's a businessman, apparently.
What year?
Before, it's been like 10 years, 13 years, something like that.
Okay.
Okay. He was recently, again, jailed for life. Mm-hmm. Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, I've heard anything about it. That actually international court or somebody, human rights organization, they said it's an upset.
Yeah, it is. That's what they said. But did, for example, 19 or so members of European consuls, did they arrive to the trial? Did they protest? Were there any sanctions put on Turkey as a result of this?
No.
No.
So how come putting sanctions on Turkey with their high inflation?
No, but no, still, point or no point. Again, we either live under laws or we live under chaos. And if these governments want to tell us what we can and can't do with a criminal who did the exact same thing, if not worse, Alexei Navalny, right? And we get sanctions for him, right? Why is, and when I think it was 17 or 19 different diplomats from different countries went to attend his trial where he was spewing all kinds of nonsense and hatred and basically digging himself a grave, in my opinion. But he's still alive in jail.
Well, everybody.
Yet Turkey. I know, but here's the thing: we get sanctions for doing something that Turkey does. Turkey doesn't get sanctions. In fact, remember when they murdered a reporter? I think no, Saudis murdered a reporter on Turkish soil. I think that's what it was, something like that. Did anything happen? Just some words from the government saying, "Oh, this is bad." That's it. That's the thing. Russians, we just want to live under a set of rules that govern everyone. This is my opinion. Fine. I would rather live under a set of rules that govern everyone rather than have one countries dictate to other countries what they can or can't do.
It would be very counterproductive to impose any sanctions on Turkey or to do anything, because it would be. Because
I'll tell you
why.
why.
They are just like Russia. They are also they are economic partner, but they are not like exactly. They are imposing any threat to freedom of speech or religion to Europe, but Russia does.
How do we threat freedom of speech to Europe when it's European countries that are banning our news networks first? That's number one.